Hi everybody, Richard Tromans here from Artificial Lawyer, and today I'm talking to Joe Cohen from Dentons, the global law firm. Hi Joe.
Hey Richard, you're right.
Yeah, very good, thanks. Today we're not just talking about Legal Innovators, which is the conference coming up November 8th and 9th, which Joe will be speaking at. We're actually going to be looking particularly at a product walkthrough of FleetAI, which is a GPT-4 and more product that Dentons has developed with its partners, and Joe can tell us more about that in a moment. Without further ado from me, let's just get straight into the product walkthrough, and then we'll do a whole bunch of questions afterwards. So Joe, could you take it away?
Okay, so so FleetAI is a product that we rolled out to all of our 1,500 staff at Dentons UK, Ireland, Middle East a few weeks ago. So everyone kind of has access to it. And the first thing you see when you log in is actually a guidance page that comes up talking about how, you must always independently validate and verify everything that comes out of the platform. It talks about the risks, there's prompt guidance, there's, reminding people that we can put client information in the tool. We'll maybe talk about that later, Richard. But in terms of the demo of the tool, so single sign, everybody comes here, and then you can select chatbot. So GPT-4, direct chat, or document upload with 3.5 or GPT-4. So this, I've got a few examples just to show you kind of what some things our lawyers are doing in the system. So far in the last 2-3 weeks, we've had about almost 600 people log in. We've had about almost 15,000 messages in the tool. So really heavy usage, some amazing, very creative use cases, all sorts really that we're seeing. And, when you walk around the office, you see, almost every other screen has got FleetAI on it, some documents in there, some chats, and it's really great to see it kind of in full organizational usage. So right, in terms of examples, so what we've got here is the GPT-4 doc uploads functionality. So I've put in here the AI Act amendments list, which is this one, for those of you that have seen it before. So this is just not the act itself, it's just the amendment list. So basically what you have is like all of these. So you've got the different amendments, and you've got the original text, and then you've got the proposed amendment. And the reason we chose this document, apart from the fact that it was about AI, is just because it's set up very poorly for AI analysis, right? Because you've got these columns, they're over different pages, they relate to each other. To a human, clearly they relate to each other, but actually there's no description of how this kind of document works. You kind of have to just see that there's different changes in italics, and there's loads of different references across a document, footnotes, over here. And actually what we wanted to really do, and we used this for the internal webinars that we had about 700-800 people dial into at Dentons. We wanted to show people that you can put in anything. It doesn't have to be formatted, it doesn't have to be standard form, whatever. So right, so put that in. It's just the paperclip really. There's no have to do anything special. You could even just drag it and drop it straight into here. And so it takes, say, maybe 30 seconds to a minute to upload. So first things first, ask it to summarize. So it will do me a summary, in 100 words, which is absolutely fine. I've then asked it to tell me which amendments deal specifically with high-risk AI systems. So this answer is quite interesting because firstly, it's given me a whole list, which is fine. It's then given me a summary of each amendment, which is not necessarily what I asked for, but is interesting nonetheless. If we actually go to that amendment, what you will see is that is correct. That amendment's about prohibiting the export of AI systems, but nowhere in the paragraph does it talk about high risk. It's just made a decision that those AI systems intended for unacceptable practices, and there's not loads of detail in the amendment itself, would qualify as high risk AI systems. Now, it's worth saying that that term, high risk AI system, is a common term in the document. It's referred to in other amendments specifically, but not in that one. Just interesting that, as we know, it's quite able to make its own decisions as to what you mean. It's certainly not like a Control F GPT-4 anyway. So right, so we did summary. I'll zoom in a little bit actually. We did summary, we then did extract. We'd probably call that extracts. It's given me a little bit of its own kind of summary analysis there, but generally speaking, I just want to know which amendments deal with a particular issue. And then, right, so now I have asked it for an analysis on a particular amendment. So it's given me its thoughts on that amendment and what you would do if you were maybe analyzing your own piece of legislation or a client contract or kind of article or a journal. You would then, read this and then, decide if it was useful, maybe probe a few more questions. But then I've actually asked it for probably the most complicated one, which is a judgment call. How practical is that amendment in terms of industry adoption, which is kind of a vague question, really, probably too vague to do anything with. What we see here is an attempt at answering the question. It's certainly something you would want to go into more detail with, actually. But I think the idea here is not to say, it's really fantastic at analyzing this specific piece of legislation, but actually whatever you put in here, and we've got hundreds and thousands of examples now of people, putting documents in here over the last few weeks, is actually, it can kind of do a job in any document, and that whether that's helping you change the drafting or during a negotiation, or just, you're trying to do an analysis or do reports, a summary, a translation, we found it to be really helpful across the board. So hopefully that particular demo just kind of shows you, kind of what it can do.
Yeah, no, that one makes total sense. And actually, there was just one little thing further up. If you just go up to the next block of text, there is that I encountered
There's an error.
while processing. Yeah, what does that mean?
So it's pretty rare. This is the only time that I've seen it on the 50 or so chats that I've done. The API is very capable. So we've got a number of APIs into GPT-4 in Microsoft Azure. Very occasionally, it will not process one. It's basically part 7 of the document, because it's chunked up the documents into different bits so it can analyze them all before putting them back together. One of them, it failed for some reason, but it's probably less than 0.1% of the time you get something like this. But it's good to show it in terms of the demo, because I wanted to show users that it can happen. And
Yeah, no,
if you re-ask the question, it will likely not happen again.
and that's very, I mean, honestly, for me, that's a good thing, because I think the worst aspect of generative AI is false positives. So, I mean, I think the fact that it can tell you it's missed something is actually very reassuring.
So in terms of telling you it doesn't know something, it's definitely less good at that. But what we've actually programmed into the tool itself is extra anti-hallucination features. So I can't say what they are, but basically limits, particularly when we're talking about document analysis, it limits the tendency of the machine to just, because what it could do here, where's that list of amendments? What it could do here is add in, one of these has got nothing to do with higher risk AI systems. And unless you checked it rigorously, which is what we're telling our lawyers to do, you may assume that actually it was when really it wasn't. But what we try and do with our infrastructure is limit that to the extent that we can.
And these are what I understand are called system prompts, where effectively you might say these are sort of like point prompts ask it to do certain tasks on a particular document. But behind that, you've built in system prompts saying,
yeah,
you must not ever give us a return that you think is not correct, or we want you to write in this particular style, or
it's things like that. Yeah, exactly.
Write in the voice of a corporate lawyer as if you're speaking to another corporate lawyer, and that kind of, so you systematize the style effectively.
For the general chatbots, for these ones, we are creating some specific ones to do very specific things that will have a lot of system prompts in there. But actually, for these ones, we decided not to do any of the tone of voice prompts, because firstly, we've got business services professionals using the tool as well, so it's not so helpful to them. But also, multiple practice groups. So the prompt guidance that we've been giving is saying, instruct the tone of voice and the style that you want. And we've got some templates for that, and we are curating some more templates. But Richard, I don't know if you want to ask a question on
Yeah,
this document.
based. Okay, well, so let me just go back one step. So, are where if I type in a question or if I ask a question, if it's doing audio, am I interrogating GPT-4 or am I interrogating Denton's vast knowledge base plus GPT-4 or some variation of the two?
So no, so this is pure GPT-4. There
Right.
is actually no option to fine tune in Azure
Mhm.
at the moment, although we've got a great relationship with Microsoft. We talk to them, once, sometimes twice a week, and have done for the last few months while we've been building this.
Mm.
Um, so similarly, it's actually not clear to me whether fine tuning the model on our client documents would actually be okay with SRA regulations. So we are
Oh,
planning to
interesting.
talk to them about that. I mean, ideally, you're meant to only use client documents for delivery of work direct to that client. So there's it's certainly a great area as to whether, that trade feeding in, let's say we're working hard on a lease report functionality here, which is about um, pre-planning loads of different prompts for the lease report, and working with the lawyer to figure out exactly what they should be, testing those against manually done lease reports, fine-tuning the prompts themselves. So that's not done with any fine-tuning of the model. It's just about careful prompting and architecture prompts. But what we could potentially do at some point is feed in, thousands of our previous lease reports to give it even more context.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure, if not that it's really possible at the moment, but it's certainly when it does become possible, it needs to be something which we would look for regulatory guidance about.
Interesting. Well, let's come back to that. Let's come back to that in a minute because there's a whole bunch
So
of questions around there. Well, okay. So if I'm speaking to GPT-4 with your system prompts around it and
yeah,
through it, let's say based on your knowledge,
yeah,
how likely
yeah,
is this act to be transposed
yeah,
into law in
yeah.
individual EU countries?
Okay. All right. Well, we'll give it a go.
It's a bit of a tricky one, but
It's so I wonder how long that answer will be. Basically, the response times of GPT-4. So this will probably take about a minute, between 30 and 90 seconds, I reckon.
Therefore, if this act is adopted, it would automatically apply to all EU countries without needing to be transposed. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not an expert on EU law, so I don't know
No,
if that's,
me
I don't
neither.
know if that's
Me
normal
neither.
or not. So the likelihood of this happening depends on various factors of political law. Interesting, interesting. So okay, I mean, maybe, yeah, I mean, but these are the kinds of questions that clients will ask, I imagine, won't they? I mean, clients will be coming to you and saying, "Hey, I'm a bit interested in this. What do you think the likelihood of X or Y happening is?" And then your lawyers may well go to FleetAI and say, "I wonder what it thinks."
Yeah, so it tends to be quite bad at predicting, usually because it ends with something like this.
Mm.
Um, we find it better for kind of analysis. What you could do is ask for some kind of like detailed analysis, would that like point towards a prediction without asking it directly to if we actually go up a little bit further to how practical is this in terms of industry adoption, again, I got a fairly kind of vague answer. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly answered the question and given you something.
Well, let's do
Um,
another one because there's something that you alluded to in the Q&A we did a few days ago about your lawyers asking it to propose questions that it might want to ask.
yes,
So
I talk about this one a lot actually. It's a great. So we've got we did this for another act actually, a UK, an English government act, and really fascinating. So maybe we'll say well, the one that we tend to use is, what questions would you, acting as an experienced lawyer, ask of this document from a legal perspective? Is that right?
Yeah, good.
So yeah, it might take a little longer.
No, that's fine. But so just for anyone listening, just to clarify, so this is only tapping the capabilities of Chat GPT 4, sorry, GPT-4. Dentons and the consultants you've worked with, Springbok AI, you together have built system prompts, but at this point, Denton's own knowledge base is not being used.
Yeah, it's not in here.
Answers. Right.
Yeah, not in there.
No.
But nevertheless, our users are seeing incredible, amazing benefits. I mean, it is early days. I mean, it's only been a few weeks. There are some people who've been using it for a few months, probably like 50, 60 people internally. So some of them have like really adopted it fully into their day-to-day working practices. But generally speaking,
Here we go. That's an experiment. How does this regulation drive? Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, I should have asked that. What are legal definitions? Yeah, definitely a lawyer involved in this process. Yeah. How will these regulations impact existing systems? Yeah. Biometric. Yeah. It's interesting because obviously that's topical. So yeah, makes sense. Can you clarify cybersecurity? Yeah, interesting. So yeah, I mean, very, very useful to anyone
yeah,
being asked by a client to consider this for them. This is very helpful.
for sure, for sure. So right, so this is the document upload feature. So in terms of the general chat, so I've got some examples here, some kind of like fairly generic ones, but so clause generation.
Yep.
So I've given it a fairly detailed ask here for a particular clause with a claims handling mechanism, including definitions, excluding IP. So actually, this is like what we would describe as like a fair prompt. We're trying to eliminate ambiguities. So it's given me a starter. It's not actually that good, and I think what we're telling our lawyers is that this is no replacement for our precedent bank and our knowledge base, but it can augment, particularly through ideas and inspiration. So, for example, I've asked it here, I don't like your claims handling mechanism. Just give me a better one and a longer one. So then it does. It gives me a claims handling mechanism, a longer one. And actually, the idea here is you, as a lawyer, would then read it and say, actually, you know what? There's a couple of bits in here that I don't have in my one, and go from there. What we're really advising people to not do is just copy and paste this blindly.
Yeah.
That really goes against the guidance on the front page and all the stuff that we've been saying in our webinars. But actually, it takes 2 minutes to get this. And there's a whole wealth of possibilities. You could then query it to go further into detail. So, you could say, for example, please go into detail on your logic behind the settlement clause above. And then it would, give you its thoughts on that, and you would kind of take them into account, and just move on, really. I think that there is no real liability attached to the tool. The lawyer has to remain in control of all the responses. So, is that the exact clause from above? Yeah, so that's good. And it's given me a bit more information here. So I haven't really had the chance to check it, but the idea is that, this would be generally helpful. It probably will miss one or two bits that an experienced lawyer might pick out. But given the fact that we got that in 30 seconds, always going to be a good use of time. And that's really what we're seeing.
And can you, I mean, as you say, it's early days. I mean, clearly I can see anyone looking at this and going, this looks great. I'd like to instantly now compare it to our own clause banks and
Mhm.
our own knowledge management system. I guess that's going to come online eventually.
Eventually. The thing with large language models is they're really not set up very well at all for like bulk data analysis. Um, I mean, the maximum for GPT, the maximum amount of characters you can analyze in one API call is about 25,000 words.
Mm.
And we actually chunk our documents less than that, because there's a concept called LLM troughing, where it kind of, let's say you're dividing the chunk up into whatever X, 10,000 words. That's not our number, but say 10,000 words. It tends to read the first bit and the last bit, but in the
Mm.
middle, there's kind of this like trough where it kind of skims it a bit,
Mm.
which is a very human thing to do, actually. But um, the so setting your character limit really high, the maximum, is not necessarily going to be the best use of the model.
Yeah, and did
Um,
you look at other models? I mean, for example, did you look at Anthropic, which I know their Claude LLM has a much wider
so,
amount
well, they
of
have
data.
100,000, so that's
Yeah,
probably about 80,000 words.
they wouldn't
But
for you. It wouldn't be
similarly, it's going
different.
to have the same issue of
Mm,
troughing.
right.
Um, so, but actually, uh, the one of the main benefits of using the Microsoft GPT APIs in Azure is the ability to disable kind of their access to the data. And actually, we've got a great relationship there. They're not interested in seeing what's in there. They want that to be private. They know that we have our client obligations in terms of confidentiality. So they can't see the prompts, the answers, the documents,
Yeah.
nothing. It's all in our private Azure. So it's also stored in the UK, and it's not used to train the model either. So that is
Ah,
how we
actually,
get
Joe,
comfortable.
actually, just on that training point, there's a lot of confusion around that still, understandably, because of the way that NLP used to get trained or is trained.
Yeah.
Um, the work that you've just done now, let's call it a piece of work, that doesn't actually alter GPT-4, does it?
No, it only exists in that particular chat window. So as soon as I delete this, this whole, obviously it's been not necessarily learning, but it's been remembering the conversation in this window. Once I delete that, that's gone.
Yeah.
And either way, it's not accessible from any other user.
And
So
so GPT-4 as an entire LLM won't actually know or have any deeper understanding of the AI Act
none of this.
tomorrow.
Well, no, it won't, because of course it won't, because that's more recent than September 2021. So
But
yeah, it
but
won't even know what
let's
AI is. Yeah.
but if it was even let's say the AI Act was done 2 or 3 years ago, would it? I mean, has this interaction in any way altered what GPT-4 is?
No, nothing. Not at all.
Right. And I think
And
it's a really, really
yeah,
important point because I think there is confusion around that.
yeah,
And I think particularly that the term training data is used a lot still
yeah.
and got,
And there
some
is no training data. There doesn't
exactly.
exist in this. Well, if we
Yeah,
fine-tuned it, then yes, that would start to come back into parlance. But there is no, the only training that you would do is get better at prompting and have
exactly.
template prompts and have your template reports.
Or
That's it's like
your tagging and ontology. If
in
you're if
terms
you're
of,
looking if you're looking for your if you're looking to draw upon your own documents.
right, I see. Yeah. Yes, because you wouldn't necessarily need to, like, as long as we could access them in a suitable way. But yeah, at the moment there's no immediate plans for integrating into our document management system or our knowledge base. Although we are actually, our KMS provider is integrating an LLM into their search tool. It's a proprietary one, so I don't know if it's any good yet. We'll have to see. But that will allow us to, um, instead of searching for a particular knowledge type, so say I'm looking for particular locked box clauses in SPA examples, and we've got a handful in our knowledge management system. You could say, I want a clause that achieves this, this, and this, and it will go away and pull me that clause together using, 5 or 10 reference clauses, and it gets me a hybrid, and it says, and here's where I got them from. That's where you find a lot of utility. But that is an on-prem proprietary LLM from our knowledge providers. So we'll have to see, how that stands up. But yeah, in theory, very valuable if it works nicely.
And what about producing a whole contract? Let's do the ubiquitous NDA, and let's say it's a very simple NDA where two parties simply want to agree to start talking about a deal, and it's not super complex. I mean, obviously, Dentons has probably got about 2 or 3 thousand different types of NDA on its books.
Well, we try and just use our one automated one, actually. But yeah, I actually think using it to generate a whole contract brings us away from standardization.
Yeah,
I'm not necessarily sure that's a good thing.
Mm.
Also, I don't think it would generate a whole contract for you. Not a very good one anyway. It can certainly generate particular clauses. If you ask it to generate a contract, it will, particularly NDA, it probably will give it to you. If you ask it to generate SPA, I don't think it would be poor.
Yeah. But I suppose, and this again comes, I mean, it starts to get very confusing, doesn't it? Because I mean, if you're going to use an LLM to create a whole document, you really want it to be drawing from your own database.
Yeah.
And
yes. Yeah. You probably would. I mean, you certainly would want that option.
yeah. And then you get to the sort of simpler response, which is, well, if you really want this beautifully made, accurate, law firm approved template, well, why don't you just use the template, which you've already got?
Well, that's it. Yeah. This doesn't replace
Yeah.
templates.
Yeah.
I mean, what you could always do is upload, let's say you're on a particularly tricky negotiation, you could upload the template into here and say, right, what I need to, amend this document to achieve these 5 aims, or my client is in this sector, or here's what they'll be thinking, here's what they're wanting to be achieving. What would you recommend? And it will say, okay, well, I'd start, here and change this bit and that bit. But that's very different than generate me the whole contract from scratch. It's going to be not on your house style. Probably the definitions will be a bit all over the place.
But could you upload a template now? If you had a template for standard NDA before an M&A discussion, take it off.
Yeah, of course.
Book.
Yeah.
Could you upload that now into this? Would you be allowed to do that?
As in right now?
Well, maybe not right now, but just generally.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you
Yeah,
can say
absolutely. Yeah,
that,
we see.
could you slightly repurpose this because one of the companies is actually in China, and we know that obviously things are going to be a bit different there. So could you tweak it correctly?
Right. Well, that is an interesting, it's a slightly more nuanced question you might think, because what it won't do is like edit the Word document. It will probably just give you kind of like high level thoughts. It'll give you detailed thoughts as well. If you want it to actually start amending the text itself, you need to be quite explicit with it. And this goes for all use cases. If you want it to, let's say you wanted you're looking at a SaaS agreement and you wanted to pull out all the termination provisions. And let's say there's a termination clause, but there's maybe a couple of other references to termination. So you want to not get a summary of the termination position, you want to extract and then amend. So if you want to do that, then if you start by saying, please find and amend, it won't do it. You have to say, please pull out verbatim all termination provisions, and it will do it. And then you say, on the basis of the above verbatim, please amend to achieve these aims. So you have to split it into separate steps. That's just like a quirk of GPT that we're seeing. So in your case, the NDA, you would, you could always ask it first what it would do, and then you could say, okay, all right, please quote for me clause, 3 that talks about jurisdiction or whatever, and then it will verbatim paste it in, and then you say, great, please apply your advice from step 1 to step 2. But yeah, no, seriously, that the whole thing about in steps, and before we spoke about getting it to ask itself questions, or just asking it if it's got anything else, like what else have you got, and it will probably give you something it hasn't already said for some reason. A little bit like a human at the end of a meeting, you might just say, has anyone got anything else? And someone will pipe up with something that they, didn't come up. There are lots of different interesting ways that we're seeing to just get the most out of the system that you wouldn't necessarily, intuitively get to.
Yeah, no, it's fact. I mean, so early days. I mean, particularly once you get your own KM provider to, well, who is, I guess it's iManage or Net Documents or something like that, to start working with you in more detail on this. That's going to be really, really fascinating. Let's just talk about just some of the sort of business issues, just very, very briefly. Obviously, this is an efficiency tool. We can say that. Are you noticing any changes in the way the lawyers behave or the way they bill or how the clients interact with them when they know this is being used? And I know we talked in the past about how Dentons actually, and people may not know this, actually uses a lot of fixed fees. And so efficiency on a particular job, you might say, is rewarded because you get the job done faster. How does that play into all of this?
So yeah, the truth is it's still too early to tell because it's only been like rolled out a few weeks ago. I think what will be quite meaningful is when the reports go live though, because that's when it's, a volume like medium complexity volume task. The first drafts are generated,
What can you just
fairly
explain
quickly.
can you just explain what that is? What's the report function?
So like the lease reporting, for example. So the idea of like thinking carefully in advance about, legally speaking, what should each prompt, service charge. You could just, today you could upload a lease into FleetAI and say, what's the service charge? What's the rent review? What's the alienation? And it will give you something. But what you should really be saying is, right, this is the service charge section of the lease report. Please keep your answer to 50 words in this tone. This is your description of who you are as an agent. We would normally include things like this, 3 bullet points, and we would exclude these 2 because they will be covered in a separate section. And then that's a lengthy prompt. And then you compare that against manually done lease reports, refine the answer till you're happy with what GPT-4 is giving you. So you do that for the whole lease report, you end up with a whole bunch of, and then lawyers can just upload all their leases into the system and then just get sent after a few hours, maybe a day, get emailed their 100 individual lease reports or like a big spreadsheet with all the answers in it or something. With the idea being that then they use that to go back, one screen they have that, and the other screen they have the lease, and they just go through and check and make sure that everything is kind of all right. That's a much quicker exercise than doing it from scratch. And the answers we're seeing are high quality. They're not like partner level, but they are good enough, probably.
But
So
does that involve, though, as you were saying earlier, does that involve using client documents or documents that have been made specifically for a client?
But we're not uploading any training data. It's just
Right.
about that. So the template lease report. So imagine the template lease report as a table, and in the table there's just like, one column is the sections, so the ones that, so termination, rent amount, 1954 Act, whatever. And then the next column where we would normally put our answer is a prompt. So that goes into the system with the leases that you put in for that, what you want it to analyze. It's not being trained on those documents, it's analyzing them particularly to give the report back to the client. So that's a normal use of the tool. So you stick them all in, it analyzes all of them, spits out the lease reports for you to then check.
Gotcha. And also, as you were saying earlier as well, everything is kept on your side of a wall. Nothing ever bleeds through to GPT-4.
Correct. Yeah. That's absolutely
Interesting.
That's
And
absolutely crucial.
what do the clients say? I mean, let's say you've got a real estate client who's heard about it, you've told them perhaps yourself, and they're like, "This is awesome." Obviously we can't operate in the same way we did before. We love working with you guys, and obviously there's much more complex work which will pay in any way that you want. But this type of work, obviously, we're going to have to come to some new arrangements.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, that the lease report thing and the other contracts are not live yet either, anyway. So that won't be till November. But that's what I think we'll really, going back to your previous question, that's something we'll really see for the more volume repeatable work. We will start seeing differences, in arrangements and lots of different things. And I think there'll be a win-win. I think that, maybe we'll fix our fees a bit lower, do them quicker, client gets, there are lots of different things you could do, but generally it'll be a win-win for the clients and the law firms. Now, as you say, well, actually, a point that was made to me the other day when I was speaking to some other GCs was things like this, diligence, so not just least real estate diligence, but also corporate and others, never actually used to be a thing. Like, you know, it's a fairly recent phenomena to do lots of diligence, and um, the quantity and the scope has you know, been increasing over the last 20, 30, 40 years. But before that, it, you know, wasn't actually done to do extensive diligence on an M&A or, you know, property portfolio takeover. And I suppose the point is that, you know, the nature of legal work does change over time. And, you know, despite that, lawyers have still been thriving and finding lots of good uses for their talents and skills. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think there'll be loads of new practice areas that open up. So particularly on AI itself. So policies, litigation, IP, as everyone starts becoming, you know, AI driven organizations. And so you know, so it's some of the more volume work that's susceptible to automation. You know, there may be an impact, but you know, law has always been a resilient profession, and so I'm not concerned too
No,
much about it.
no, I totally agree. I totally agree. And also, what will happen is that legal documents will get longer, and there'll be more of them because that's always the way. It's
Yeah,
it's the
well,
irony
maybe.
of technology is that it becomes easier to digest and analyze, but it becomes easier to make them, and so there's a corresponding increase in size. But
You know, we never had 600 users of any platform, any legal tech platform, let alone in 3 weeks. Certainly not the AI platforms that we had
yeah,
ever.
yeah. So actually, yeah,
And
let's just underline that point for anyone listening. This is the most successful legal tech product you've ever rolled out.
yes, that's without a doubt. Um, you know, and I think that why is that? Because very obvious to anybody who uses it that there's immediate value for them. We don't need to wait for any fine tuning. It's safer client stuff. We're not, well, we've set it up so there's no disbursement mechanism. It's just like a sunk cost, essentially investment cost of the firm. And so, you know, that's why we're getting so many users, and it'll be more. It'll be, you know, we want 1,000, you know, before the end of the year. That's the aim. You know, in
One
regular
technical
usage.
question, actually, particularly because Dentons is such a global firm. And in fact, you're the quintessential global firm with so many aspects to you. How does it deal with languages? So let's say there's someone in Germany perhaps listening to this and they're saying, oh, actually, I know I got an email from the IT team telling me that I can now use this, but it's all in English. Can they have a complete
So
German version?
so our plan is to roll this out to the rest of the Dentons um, offices, the rest of Dentons regions before the end of this calendar year. So they will be asking that question soon. So it's really good with other languages. One improvement we're trying to make is to allow it to analyze scanned PDFs that are not in Latin-based languages. That's more of an OCR engine issue than a GPT issue. So in one of the other examples I've got on the screen is translate the summary already done into Japanese. Interestingly, it came up with a slightly different summary, which again is a quirk. You got to be, you know, if you would do it again, you would say pursuant to the, you know, you might even copy and paste what you already wrote and say colon translate this if you really wanted it to be very precise. But you know, very good. It's very good with other languages. What we're seeing. So you know, for example, we've got a lot of Arabic speaking offices in our region. So they can't do the scanned PDF, but they can certainly do it in the chat, and they can use native PDFs, and it's really helping them.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. It's impressive. Well, let's leave it there for now because I think we covered a lot of ground. But so
Got
we'll
more to cover on the conference day, though, obviously. So
exactly. And
I want to leave a little bit of content.
exactly. And yeah, so if you have got this far in the video, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it as interesting as I have. Thank you very much to Joe. Joe is head of innovation for the UK, Europe, and
UK, Ireland, Middle East.
Middle East. And he will be one of our key speakers, Legal Innovators UK, which is a 2-day conference in London on November the 8th and 9th. And if you'd like more information, just go to the website, which is legalinnovators.co.uk, and you can get a ticket. And thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you there. Bye.